Okay, let's go to David. And he says, Pete Rose should be allowed in the Hall of Fame. Being an a-hole, cheating others, and committing fraud is the latest rage.
Nice shot. Yeah, I hate to say it. Pete Rose checked off a lot of those boxes, but I just don't think you can tell the story of Major League Baseball. But you didn't answer the second question, though. David, if you let Pete Rose in based on all the junk that he did, what do you do for Shoeless Joe Jackson back in the day? What do you do with the steroid cheats, the Bonds and the Clemens, etc.? Again, you can argue with me, Lee, you can't tell the story about baseball's history without incorporating Barry Bonds' what was it, 756 home runs, whatever the hell it was, or Roger Clemens strikeouts and Cy Young awards and all that. Tough call. Baseball open a Pandora's box if they do this?
Sort of. I mean, because we've been debating this for decades, this whole thing. But I'm just trying to think if any, does the NFL or the NBA, have they ever blacklisted certain players like this, or is it just baseball?
No, I don't think they've blacklisted people, but bad people don't get votes. And people who got in then got themselves in trouble, a.k.a. O.J. Simpson, don't get taken out of the Hall of Fame. But anybody that walks into Canton and sees O.J. Simpson's bust understands what a slimeball of a person he was and what he was involved in.
Yeah.
So a tough call.
It is. And, we just had the Oscars, last night. And you're thinking, well, would they ever take away an Oscars award because someone did something scummy? It's just weird how Major League Baseball seems like they kind of are kind of all high and mighty, got their nose in the air about this. But then on the same time, they have a Pete Rose exhibit in the Hall of Fame.
Okay, what are we doing about Shoeless Joe?
It's a hypocrisy. Yeah, let in Shoeless Joe. Bring him in, tell the story, but, wag your finger at Shoeless Joe for what he did wrong, but still do it.
Okay, put an asterisk on the plaque. I agree with you, although I thought Pete Rose was so out of control as a person, but that's who he was. Was he a great player? Hell yes, but I thought, a really bad person.
Just as an aside on the Shoeless Joe thing, I'm watching this new show on Max, and it's called Boardwalk Empire. Have you ever heard of that?
Yes.
And it takes place during, the late 19 teens and into the 20s during Prohibition. And part of the show, one of the attorneys was, or one of the gamblers got associated with the White Sox scandal. And so it's interesting how they integrated real life history into this fictional show. Yeah. And so baseball kind of makes its way in different ways.
Side note, baseball, if you're a baseball fan, you got Netflix, or go find it. Watch the movie 8 Men Out. Like, phenomenal historical perspective with a lot of star people in it. 8 Men Out, about the Black Sox scandal of 1919. If you like baseball, this is something you ought to see. Okay, we move on. David, thanks for the input. Go ahead, John.
Okay, let's go here to Angel. And he says, it will always be California Angels, that the name we grew up with, although I don't mind Anaheim.
I like California Angels. That's historical. That was Autry, which was a pretty classy operation. That was good days. But this whole thing is not about how I market the name and what does the logo or the new set of jerseys look like. This is about, can you fix the roster, and can you make this owner, who wants to be in the number 2 market in the country, spend up? I mean, Tony Clark really, he hit Artie Moreno with a broadside of criticism. But I want to see Tony Clark do the damn same thing to the guy in Miami, because I think that is an outrage. And obviously the Athletics and the Pirates and Detroit and all that. And maybe that's going to change once we get to the collective bargaining agreement. But California Angels is okay by me, but I want to see a better product on the field.
Yeah, of course, you got to start there. You need better players. You need to make the right investment. You need some good luck. They haven't had that either. The California Angels, I always just think of Nolan Ryan, don't
you?
Sure.
And Frank Tanana.
Yeah, and the cap logo, did they have the one that was an A with the halo?
They sure did.
That was the big A. And then there was another time they had the state of California emblem. Maybe they had on the sleeve. But it's interesting too, is there are very few teams that don't have a city name or a state name. Now, actually, California Angels is a state, but I'm thinking like New England Patriots. It's like a region.
Yes.
Back then, I don't know if people in Sacramento were rooting for the California Angels because they were California, but it's just an interesting concept. And maybe it brings back golden ages of California when it was a greater place.
Angels did not want to respond to what Tony Clark had to say. I guess I understand why, because probably what he said was pretty damn truthful. Okay, move on. Next question.
Okay, moving on. And here's another comment about Pete. and this is from RJM. Pete sealed his fate the minute he gambled on baseball. He knew the rules as a player and knew the rules as a manager. Pete did this to himself. He doesn't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
Oh, that's a mouthful from RJM. That's okay. He signed the document. No, then 9 years later, he promptly asked to be allowed to have the document rescinded. And the commissioners said, absolutely not. But at the end of the day, his memorabilia is in the hall. So if his memorabilia is there, should his name and his plaque be there? It's a tough emotional call. But yeah, the rules are the rules. And he really violated the rules. And I'm led to believe there is documentation that he bet on games as a player because he was an addicted gambler.
Yeah, yeah. And you've been reading that story about the Fresno State basketball
Yes.
players. So they're betting on their own games there.
Yeah, they were betting on we're going to win and we're going to win by this much, etc. But Pete Rose said he just bet on his team to win. We don't know what's factor fiction totally.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Just move on. Let's go. Let's keep going here. Angels talk. This is what I Smash. He goes, has Tony used his brain cells? Angels have about 60 to 70 million on the injured list.
Well, I concur with you. As he sat there and he beat up Artie Moreno, one of his clients was a druggie big time. I mean, I don't see him stepping forward and saying Josh Hamilton ought to give Artie Moreno all the money back that he took because he kept relapsing from drug problems and then he finally walked away from baseball. He still got paid. So, Tony Clark needed to put the other piece of the equation in. Rendon, I don't think is a bad dude. Rendon has just got bad injury problems, and yet that's a phenomenal contract too. And again, that's the short-circuiting of Artie Moreno's impulsiveness, giving Pujols what he gave him. And Pujols is a great gentleman and has had a great career, but he was on a down cycle statistically, and Artie still signed him, I think, for $245 million over a 10-year contract, which was crazy. And he didn't get equal value off that investment. So, Tony can condemn Moreno as to what he's paying right now as of breakfast this morning, but there's other things that Artie did out of impulse that didn't work out. He's got to give Artie a little bit of credit there. And then obviously the tragedies with Skaggs and the drugs and the terrible drunk driving death of Nick Edenhart being an innocent victim. So yeah, they've been cursed, but Tony Clark is dealing with the here and now today. And that's why he was really critical.
Yeah, you should be critical. But isn't it interesting how baseball has that guaranteed contract that's not available in almost any other sport?
Mm-hmm.
And even corporate contracts as an employee, if you sign a 2-year, 3-year deal, there's still like an escape clause and a way you can be bought out. They're not going to let you go and have to pay you to sit at home for 3 years.
Well, if somebody got suspended for life as a third-time steroid abuser, for example, PED, maybe that would void the contract. If somebody gets arrested for murder, that violates a clause in the contract about morals.
Right.
But for the most part, bad citizens still get to walk away with their money for the most part.
Yeah. It's I just think the players union did remarkable job getting that ability to have those guaranteed deals. Because to me, it's outrageous in some of these crazy cases.
They got them protections for a lot of things, and probably rightfully so in 4 out of every 5 cases. But there are the Josh Hamilton cases there that have to be offended by.
Did you see the note earlier today about Yu Darvish saying he might not finish the rest of his contract, and if he does, he would just walk away. He wouldn't demand to be paid for the years he doesn't pitch.
Unique and classy guy if he wishes to retire at age 40.
Yeah, interesting story.
Yeah. All right, we move on. Thank you.
Okay, let's talk Aztec basketball with Hitman. He goes, San Diego State University will get whacked in the first round, not playing complete basketball right now.
Well, that depends whether or not Guatha's back. If Guatha's back, it's a very different team. But at the end of the day, if he's not ready because of the hyperextension of the knee, this becomes an enormous challenge. And let's understand it. They're not going to be playing at Viejas Arena. I know they've had all this history of success at Thomas and Mack, but maybe they win a first round game against a lesser team. But once they get in the Final Four, it's going to be a challenge because then you're playing really good people. You're playing Utah State and you're playing some of the others. And if you don't have Guath, then you're half a team in terms of your bigs. So, I mean, Heidi, Coleman Jones, they just have to play beyond what they've shown over the course of the season. The guards have to play what they have shown they can play in terms of perimeter defense, and then they got to hit shots along the way. But this is not a slam dunk if Guatha's not there. If Guatha's there, then they have a chance maybe to get to the finals against Utah State, and then you see.
Yes, if Guath is there, I think they have a very good chance to run the table in the Mountain West tournament. But I think, here to Hitman's point, if they make it to March Madness, yeah, they could be one and done, and especially if they get one of the last four in, you got to go to Dayton for those play-in games.
Sure.
I mean, that could be a tough road. But it all depends on Guath. But they have made, I think, like the semifinals, like some ridiculous number of times in a row.
Well, they've done that, John, with the bulk of the roster being fourth, fifth, or even in some cases sixth year guys. They all those COVID kids, they got that extra year. They stayed. And so this is different. This is as young a roster, I think, as Brian Dutcher has had since he took over as head coach. And yet they got 20 wins. It's not the same Mountain West as it was a year ago when 6 teams went to the tournament. I'm a little bit surprised that they've not grown collectively as a team, because historically under Brian Dutcher, Aztec basketball would get better and better and better as we went deeper into the season. And this thing has been really, really erratic. And now the big guys hurt.
Yeah, they're young. You got to give them some for that. And I think amongst the players, amongst the teams that are in contention for the March Madness, they're probably the youngest team. So what they're doing is great. I mean, Dutcher is a magician. Yep. As much as we thought Fisher was wonderful, Dutcher's taken it to a whole new level.
Yeah, his X's and O's philosophy, especially in the face of adversity, what he did in New Mexico, I just never thought that was possible, as shorthanded as they were, but they manned up. They did some really unique things. But that was a one-time thing. And then they go to Wyoming, and they should have torched those guys, because those guys, they don't have any athletes, and they got mugged. And they probably could have lost that game. Should have lost that game.
Well, yeah, that could have happened. I mean, but I think they were behind by 3 at halftime. But wasn't it crazy, all those technical fouls? And some of them seemed like the refs were overreacting. Didn't you think that?
Well, we don't know what, those players have a tendency to be kind of mouthy. This is the mouthiest team I think Dutcher's ever had. And then Dutcher lost his mind. I thought Dutcher was going to get ejected. It came out on the court. I mean, he was as red-faced as the
Did you read his
hoodie.
lips?
Yeah.
WTF.
He did not use the King's best English, and I'm sure the players weren't using the King's best English either. Okay, thanks for the Aztec comment. We'll see. We'll worry about March Madness once we get through Mountain West Conference tournament. John, next one.
Okay, let's go to Richard. He goes, fans forum. He goes, it's about time the Padres need to focus on their own task at hand and stop talking about the Dodgers. Manny's comments about taking down LA, never mind, he was a no-show in the NLDS.
Well, he's been kind of streaky, over the course of his career, making all that kind of money. I mean, he was the one that made the comment to me about, just read the back of my baseball card. Well, yeah. Well, the back of your baseball card shows 2 unbelievable failures as the captain of this team. The crap season, what year was it? 23 or 22? Which was the year in which they grossly underachieved? 23.
Yeah.
So that, and then you got 24 straight shutout innings against the Dodgers when this was supposed to be the year maybe you could be a World Series team, and that happened. So that happened on Manny's watch to Manny's team. So we need to hold him a little bit responsible instead of cheerleading everything is great. Everything's not totally great, but the window's tight. I think if this front four of the starting rotation, and I'm catching a lot of heat. I've read some of the heat I'm taking. This front four, I think, is pretty good. And we broke it down last week. I think of all the starters in Major League Baseball, their front four is probably the 5th best in baseball. You got the Dodgers, you got the Yankees. No one's paying attention to the starting rotation of the Arizona Diamondbacks, which I think is really good. I think the Padres have the 5th best top 4. But they get anybody hurt from that group, they're in a world of trouble, because outside of Waldron and maybe Kolek, and we got to see if he can pitch in the real season as a guy of the rotation, they don't have a lot of insurance policy guys there. If anybody gets hurt from that top group, Yu Darvish and Dylan Cease, Michael King, and even Pivetta, any of those guys get dinged, and the Padres are in real trouble. But on paper right now, I think the 5th best starting staff in all of Major League Baseball, because I broke every staff down when I did a research piece that we talked about this past week.
Yeah. I mean, they have a great staff, but remember, 2 of the top 4 are in the NL West, according to your ranking.
Yeah,
with the Dodgers
D-backs.
Yeah, so that's a tough road to go. But, this whole notion about the Padres, are they talking about the Dodgers? Well, the MLB network, they're doing the tour, the training camps. They're doing like 2 teams a day. Well, that they constantly ask the players, "Oh, what do you think about the Dodgers are doing?" And they were asking Mike Schill, do you feel intimidated by the amount of money that the Dodgers? And Mike Schill says no, and it was like a quick no. He goes, "We're worried about our guys," And the same thing they ask Manny and they ask Fernando, and they're trying to stay focused on their own team, but the media just constantly throw gas on the fire.
Well, but that's the media's job, is to go get answers to the story. What's the story? I mean, Dodgers, payroll, and if you want to take it one step farther, evil umpire. They're just doing their job. That's what I do. I ask them all the same questions.
Right, yeah. So the thing is that the Padres can't win for losing, so they want to talk about themselves. They keep being asked about the Dodgers.
Just go play the game. Is it opening day yet? We're getting there. Dodgers, Cubs, Japan. I think it's March 23rd, 24th. That's going to be cool.
Yeah, that's like, what, 2.5, 3 weeks, right?
Exactly.
Nice.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, let's go here to John. And he says, MLB and pro sports might not want their players gambling, but they sure seem to like the revenue it brings in. Going to Cap One Arena to see a Caps or Wizards game, and they have a sports book in the arena. Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa did a lot to save baseball after a strike. We allow guys convicted of drug smuggling in the hall. I remember Willie Mays and Mickey Mantle being banned for taking PR jobs at a casino. It's all a bit hypocritical to me.
Yeah. He's not the first one, but that's a very potent, is that an adjective or an adverb? Hypocritical. That's a very potent statement about, sponsorships. Give me your casino money, sponsorships, which is, I hope none of our guys show up in the casino on a road trip and blow money or get involved with gamblers to pay off gambling debts. It's a risk that everybody's taking, as witnessed by your comment about the mess at Fresno State or the trauma down at the University of New Orleans. It's really hard to police players in their private time, and some of these people, stupid as they are getting involved with gamblers.
Yeah, and I remember Tulane had that point shaving scandal.
Sure,
that was a long time ago.
Way back, Fresno State, Jerry Tarkanian, that was a terrible scandal.
Yeah, but I think in the end, sports just has to acknowledge the new reality that gambling is a part of reality. It's heavily integrated in the sport. It fuels interest in the sport. Accept it, but still police the players so it doesn't turn into the World Wrestling Entertainment.
Yeah, I think there have been 9 baseball players. Now, a whole bunch of them have been minor leaguers, have been suspended in the last 2 years. A couple of them, the Padre was a Padre minor leaguer, suspended for life. So, yeah, it's out there. But if the sanctions get steep enough and you start to nail big names for what they've done wrong, now it sends a message. But yet, the world says we need to put Pete Rose back in the Hall of Fame on the ballot.
Yeah, he does. He belongs in.
Okay.
Let's go here down the list. We'll go to Gordon. He goes, "Hi, Lee and John. Watching and listening from Las Cruces, New Mexico. Great show as always. Thanks for bringing up New Mexico State and some of your sports updates."
Well, tough time. Aggies have gone through a real tough time. Lobos have gone through a tough time. I don't know in modern day sports that there's a tougher set of circumstances for coaches to try to work and live on in this modern era than at New Mexico or New Mexico State, or even just down I-10 at Texas El Paso. When you don't have resources and you have no way of resources and you don't have much of a tradition in your athletic programs, that's really hard. And when you have the good season, somebody's going to come take your coach, or somebody's definitely going to come take your players. So I would, I wrote this, or I made a comment about this. New Mexico and New Mexico State might be the 2 toughest places to have to coach right now, just because there's not a lot of great tradition. Not to say that the Pan American Center in Las Cruces isn't a cool place to see a game, or being in the pit isn't an experience. But, if you don't have tradition, you don't have resources, and you haven't had great success, how the hell do you stay your head above water? Lobos, what a great football season they had this past year with Bronco Mendenhall. And he was one and done. He went from there and he left. And where'd he go? Utah State?
Yeah, Utah State.
After one really successful season where he put the Lobos back on the map. And poor New Mexico State is just staggered in terms of resurrecting their football program and keeping it at a competitive level. I mean, their fans and their alum follow it, but they don't follow it to the point that some of these bigger schools with fundraising and NIL money. It's just a different time.
Well, New Mexico is a poor state, relative to California and Texas. I mean, my son played at New Mexico for the baseball team. And you're pitching a baseball pitcher at elevation. That's a tough place to play, I'll tell you what. But I remember New Mexico State, was it 3 years ago? They had this really enormous basketball player, and I think he was like Pakistani or from India, and but he was like 7 something. He was a beast, and I think he might have gotten drafted or played in the G League. You remember that?
I remember, right. It's faintly, but their problem is holding on to players or holding on to coaches to do a good job in impossible situations and wind up leaving.
Well, yeah, because there's so much more money elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I would say not only the Aggies and the Lobos and the UTEP Miners and Wyoming's in the same set of circumstances. Now, that's the only university in the state. But I swear to you, I bet they don't have 3 high school players a year that can play Division I college football. And I don't think they got a ton of resources.
They don't.
They support Wyoming football like you wouldn't believe. But, we watched the basketball game the other night. Did they have 50 people there? I mean, the empty seats were phenomenal in that auditorium. And that's a program that has had some really good seasons, but they can't keep the coaches who say keep leaving.
Yeah, the coach they have now was a Sundance Wicks. I love that name. He seems like a good guy, but yeah, he might only be there for a little bit. By the way, the Arena Auditorium, which is that's in a redundant name, isn't it?
Yes.
It just drives me crazy. The other comment, though, about New Mexico State, I'll say this, is that when New Mexico played New Mexico State in baseball, it's a great rivalry in all the sports, but the New Mexico State University had an incredible television production team.
Mm-hmm.
When they were filming or, live streaming the game there in Las Cruces, and I was really impressed with what they did there.
Is that the game your kid gave up 6 runs in the first inning and they had to drag him off the mound?
Yeah.
Altitude.
Yeah, altitude's tough.
Yeah. What I'd really like to see, and I was hoping the Mountain West would do it, but it hasn't happened, with the ones that are remaining behind after San Diego State, Boise State defect, and they brought UTEP in, they should bring New Mexico State in. I mean, that would be great because then you'd have a triangle of the Aggies, the Lobos, and the Miners as a way to recreate that rivalry and put them in a better conference situation. I'd like to see New Mexico State get it. New Mexico State's had terrible off the field, off the floor problems with guns, betting, sexual assaults. They've had a real leadership problem in the Aggies athletic program. Keep chugging, Las Cruces. Thanks for joining us.
One of my son's teammates when he was playing for New Mexico Lobos was murdered. He was killed in a bar fight. It was a tragic story. So New Mexico has a certain crime level. It's a poor state, but there's a lot of good people there. Our experiences there were very positive. So yeah, I like your idea of mixing El Paso in there, because then you get a little bit of that Texas Western history and all of the great things that brought to the table.
Las Cruces, you stay with us every week. Thanks for joining us long distance. Go ahead, John.
Okay, let's go here to Robert. A couple of topics here. One is Pete Rose should be allowed to be in the Hall of Fame after he waits as long as Shoeless Joe. And then any thoughts on Scott Kingery last 2 years in AAA?
Well, he was a guy with the Phillies, and he's a multi-position guy. Got to prove he can hit Major League pitching on a consistent basis. He's one of the, 28 or 21 street free agents the Angels have brought in. Some of their guys are playing really well in the spring. Kyle Hendrick, the Chicago Cub right-hander, has not given up a run in 3 starts for the Halos in the Cactus Leagues. Now, he was a really consistent pitcher with the Cubs, and I said, well, if he can be what Kyle Hendricks used to be, that's a nice insurance policy. They got Kikuchi, who came from the Astros, a former Blue Jay. He got smoked in his first start. He couldn't get anybody out, and they took him out in the first inning. But again, he's a vested veteran. They got 3 weeks to work on that. So Kingery, he's part of the rotation with Kevin Newman and all these other insurance policy veterans. He'll get a chance. And he might be a bench guy. He's not going to be a starter at this point. But with Zach Neto not being able to start the season, the young star shortstop, Kevin Newman's probably going to be the starting shortstop. That probably opens a chance for Kingery to come off the bench.
Yeah, I remember when Kingery was with the Phillies coming up, and he was the next thing and never quite panned out. It's kind of like Brandon Rogers is another player, another middle infielder, and he was with the Rockies.
Yeah, and they let him go, and it kind of stunned me.
Yeah, but he's bounced around a little bit, and I don't think he's really emerged as an everyday player.
Hasn't gotten consistent. Has not hit back to what Rogers hit back early on, because I thought star in the making here.
Yeah.
And he had a year and a half, and then he just downhill. Now he's gone. Now, he's either in Arizona or he's in Houston. He just signed like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. There's a video Tommy Pham was talking about how service time in Major League Baseball used to be 5.5 years. Now it's only around 3. So guys, they show up, they get a cup of coffee, and they're gone. I mean, they churn through this talent so fast.
Union got them a good deal. It doesn't mean that they're staying. You got to produce to stay.
No question.
Robert, thanks for joining us. Go ahead.
Okay, go to Hector here. He goes, Lee, do you think the Chargers would have preferred some Robert Frost instead?
He's making reference to Harbaugh's team meetings where he's quoting Chaucer and Shakespeare. Robert Frost road well traveled and all that. I'll be interested. The Chargers have not responded to the survey in which their players rated Jim Harbaugh 26th and 32nd in a couple different categories. So I told you, Harbaugh, tent revival speech. It's great for a while, but I think I kind of get worn out on that.
Some coaches are intellectuals, and have like really good things to say. I mean, I think Popovich is one of those, and John Wooden, of course, is like a master philosopher in his own way. But then there's other coaches that kind of get full of themselves, and they think, that they're like a Shakespeare historian.
The report said one of the players wrote, as Charger players evaluating their own organization with a list of, I think it's 11 different questions they checked off. One of the players wrote, what value is there to sit in a team meeting in which the coach talks about Shakespeare or Chaucer for 26 minutes? What value? They were criticizing time efficiency, I think, was the topic to read Harbaugh, and that's how we got a 32.
Well, hopefully you make some adjustments. You're getting some feedback.
Okay.
Important feedback.
We move on.
Okay.
Thanks, Hector.
Let's go here to some social media comments from the crowd. And let's go start here with Ernie. And he says, hey, thanks, Lee. 2 San Diego staples, Lee Hacksaw and Dixieline lumber. Love them both for over a half a century.
And what about the guy in left field? I'm gonna step aside on my website. I'm gonna let John start writing once a week column. John Riley from left field with his opinions. He'll be responsible for every other junk that comes out of his keyboard. But salute the guy, because I wouldn't be here doing this were it not for him. So I blame him when it goes bad.
Well, we have complementary skills, I think. No one will top you in the world of bringing sports content topics on the table. I'm just here to kind of let it, channel through the interwebs.
Okay, but salute him too, because he's part of the problem here as well as being part of the solution. Thanks for being with us.
Okay, let's go here to Carlos, and he goes, why is there a Padres on the YouTube thumbnail? A few weeks ago, you guys were talking about how the Padres rotation and team was in trouble. They had a mid-starting pitcher, and all of a sudden they're a top rotation?
No, because we knew how good the top 3 were, but you need at least 5. And in all honesty, you probably need 7 or 8 starters. Well, the Padres get Pivetta, and Pivetta was a pretty good pitcher. Didn't show up statistically because Boston was in the middle of rebuild last year, and they were playing all their kids. And they started really bad, and they finished really strong. Pivetta was part of that. As a number 4 starter, Pivetta is rock solid. I'd take that number 4 over most of the number 4s other teams are running out there. But they're wafer thin. And if Waldron can be what Waldron was the first half of last season, okay, now you got 5. And then obviously, if they think Kolek makes this jump from the bullpen to become a starter, that's an insurance policy. That's 6. And Kolek has not given up an earned run yet in exhibition play. So, he's saying, I was talking about holes. Well, they did have holes prior to the Pivetta acquisition and then the emergence of a new look with Waldron and what Kolek has shown so far. So they're better now than they were in mid-February. So I make a comment in mid-February and people think it's set in cement. It's going to be that way forever and ever. No, because teams change. Guys get injured. Guys develop like Jackson Merrill, or they make deals to bring guys from the outside that are insurance policies and add. Does that make sense? Or
well, it just depends what your benchmark is. Like if you're going to compare the Padres starting rotation to the Dodgers, it's apples and oranges. It's broomsticks and closets. So but when you compare it to all the other major league teams, I mean, if they had with their top 3, they were sort of in the mid of the pack, and now they got the 4th guy with Pivetta, but the other one in the mix is Vasquez, and he kind of got lit up a couple of nights ago, right?
His history right there is young guy, good innings, then a bad inning, and he never survives the bad inning. And that That was all of last year, and that's what he was his last start. He just got creamed in the first couple innings. So he's probably there's at this point, as we sit here, he's probably your seventh starter. But if you to go to him, if he becomes more regular, I think you got problems. But their whole thing, that's what spring training is just to give them innings, build them, and just slot them once we get to the end of the Cactus League as to how deep they can be. But you're going to need depth because the injury factor in Major League pitching is just it's devastating. So that's where we are.
All right, let's keep moving. Okay, let's talk some Angels here. And this was with RJM for USC. And he goes, Artie Moreno is the Jerry Jones of baseball, saying again the team is not for sale. Why not? You have been the worst clown act owner. Gene Autry is rolling in his grave.
Well, Artie was well received when he bought the thing from Disney. You know, they did get to the World Series. They did win. And then Disney kind of let it fall into neglect. And Artie came on board and rescued it. And they had success with what he inherited. But they had nothing but bad luck since. And, you know, bad acquisitions, bad injuries, bad drug problems, bad tragedies off the field. It's just been one after the other for Artie Moreno. Now, they reinvested. Their payroll has been bumped up. It's at $202 million right now. But for supposedly being in the second market in the country is Tony Clark of the Union. He really stepped out of character by nailing them last Friday. He said, hey, you want to be number two market in the country, then spend like you're the number two market in the country. Don't be sitting here with a $202 million payroll when the luxury tax is at $241. You got money to spend. You need to go get more quality players. Now, Tony just wants players to be signed. Tony's not paying attention to Josh Hamilton, the druggie, stealing all that money, or what's happened to Rendon because of injuries, because that's all part of the equation too. So, but he was really pointed in what he said about Artie Moreno, and then the jury is out until they get better. They can't have another 90-loss season. They got to make some progress, but they've got farm system guys that got there, and more young guys coming this year. We'll just see if they and as John said, they need a stroke of luck. They've had so much bad luck with injuries and tragedies too.
You know how, like, I know with the Padres, they'll talk about a window, of where they project when their team could be contenders. And I remember where they were talking about this 22 to 25 year range back in 2018. But you never hear that language from the Angels, which goes back to, I don't know what their strategy is. I just don't understand it.
Concur. I mean, they've drafted a lot. A few of them have gotten there. They had one draft, I want to say it's about 4 years back now. They used all 21 of their picks on pitchers. Not one of those guys has gotten to the major leagues, has been an impact guy. That system failed. Now, they got the young shortstop, they got the young catcher, they got the young first baseman, they got this high draft pick, a second baseman, third baseman this year that might be the next one stepping forward. They just need to continue to develop. But to go from 99 losses to being a playoff team, that's a lot of steps you got to take. So they're not anywhere near close to this is who we can be.
Yeah. It's just a disappointment.
Yep.
Okay, let's jump around. We'll talk here about Coach Prime. This is from G. Smith. And he goes, apparently you have not paid attention to his up-to-date recruiting class, #1 quarterback out of high school, #1 defensive lineman, or maybe top 5 in other spots that you need to pay attention to before you talk this crap on your podcast, because it's inaccurate and I'm being nice.
I'm not sure that I've talked a lot of crap outside of the fact I totally disagreed with Coach Prime running off his entire roster, throwing them all into the transfer portal. He's done that 2 years in a row. He wound up with 17 recruits. He's had a good recruiting year. A couple of kids, late commits, decommitted other places, including the young quarterback. That he's done well. Now, there is no Shedeur Sanders right there, and there is no more Travis Hunter. So this will be a different type of Colorado football team rather than having that experience of those two kids and what they did at Jackson State. They flipped Jackson State and kind of saved them. And obviously they helped make Colorado something really special, but those guys are now gone. But he has been a magnet. He's got 17 transfers, and I think the last I checked, 17 high school commitments. So that's positive. But when you say I'm talking crap, I'm not denouncing him. They were overwhelmed the first year with a bad offensive line because I ran off so many players. Second year started well, kind of faded at the back end, got their brains beat out right at the end of the season. And now they'll go to his third year, but he won't have Shedeur and he won't have Travis Hunter, and those are two really significant kids. So he's making progress. We'll see now if they can, and then grow this, if they go from 8 wins to 9, bowl game, success, or regress back to 3 or 4 wins because it'll be a rebuild season. But I'm just giving you the facts as I view it. It's not that I have any agenda, Coach Prime. I'm just telling you who it is, what he did, my response to it. No? Yes?
You still call him Neon Dion, and I know he doesn't like that. And Coach Prime supporters don't like him being referred to by that old nickname. But I remember you were talking about how Prime wasn't going on the high school visits.
Yeah, last week we had that story broke that he's not making recruiting visits. You want to come here? Come visit here. Come visit me.
Yeah, but it just goes to show you that the magnet effect is far greater than any negativity of him not flying out to, some small high school in Missouri to go talk to a player.
Well, he's only been there 2 years. We'll see what third year is. And, if they give ground in this third year because his sons are gone, then you'll say he's not doing it correctly. We'll see what the year 3 brings. He's had success. There's no doubt they've had success. But hell, when you're 1-11 at the school with great tradition, God, Bill McCartney must be spinning in his grave as to what that thing had become. And he rallied it. He did a really good job. But at the end of the day, there are a lot of different facets to the job, except having media shows and videographers going with you every time you go to the training table to eat and things of that nature. There's a lot more to the game. We'll see what year 3 is like.
Do you think the athletic director at Colorado is still supportive?
Sure.
Because probably that he's bringing in way more money, making, putting Colorado back on the map where they belong. But will Prime Zach ever be too tired? I can never imagine him being fired.
It just depends. What do they become? He's had first year doing it my way, second year trying to build on it, having to redo it. Now we'll see what the third year is. It's way too early to say this was bad hire. Good hire financially, hell yes, for the university. In terms of notoriety, hell yes. We'll see if they can translate this and just take another step up this ladder of being in the playoffs, 12-team playoffs.
Right on. Yeah.
Okay, we move on.
Okay, we'll talk some Dodgers here with Joe Schmoo. He goes, Lee, the owners of the Dodgers is a hedge fund. Their total job is to make money and make money off of it. By the time these deferred payments are due, Guggenheim will have made the deferred amount of money through their investments. This is brilliant on the Dodgers' part.
Oh, it's creative financing. There's no doubt about it. And if the revenue streams of baseball continue to grow, even though they may have to pay 8 players who are no longer part of the roster, including Ohtani, those payments don't kick in till 2033, I think is the chart I built. The payments are 2033 to 2046, $1 billion for 8 players who'll definitely be gone. But if the revenue streams of baseball continue to grow the way they've grown, they'll be able to finance it and fund it. Collective bargaining agreement may view things differently going forward. The owners may want to make adjustments and changes on the next CBA, but Guggenheim's got the resources and have creatively financed this. They're not going to do it every year. There's 8 deferrals right now. There's not going to be 16 a year from now. So we'll just have to see. The other thing is, will the other clubs start to do business that way? If you're in the number 2 market in the country in LA, you can probably do it. If you're in whatever the market size of Toronto is in Canada, maybe you can't do it. That you can't have that many deferred contracts, et cetera. But I think there'll be some more that'll be doing it that way.
The money in this sport just keeps growing and growing. It's unbelievable. Now, $1 billion is deferred, but they have to put 10% aside, right? So roughly speaking, $100 million they put into an account, and that they can invest that and grow that. Maybe they can 10x it if they're lucky to get it up to cover the whole expense. But I think we're talking here about Guggenheim having investment income outside of the Dodgers' total financial package, right? It's like extra money that's coming into the system.
Yeah, but there's only limitations as to how you can use the extra money in the system as it relates to running your baseball franchise. There's limitations there.
Yeah, there's got to be. Yeah.
So interesting comment.
Okay.
Yeah, and Guggenheim's different than everybody else. Yankees are different. So are the Mets. Baseball's big issue is they got to make sure it's just not 5 teams in baseball that are dominant and the other 25 just show up and get their brains beat out. That's not good for the overall health of the game. That's the next thing that the union has to pay attention to, is the competitive balance, because baseball is very different than the NFL. And what makes the NFL great? Competitive balance and revenue share. So they're going to have to change some of the structure of revenue sharing in baseball and go back to my statement, Florida spending. You got to mandate that Miami and Tampa and Sacramento and Pittsburgh and Detroit, that they have to spend at a certain level And if they all spend, that'll mean more players will go there because that's where the payday is going to be for the second tier free agent pitcher and the 280 hitter. That'll make those franchises better. I don't know. I feel like I'm talking to the wall and people don't understand it. You're a smart guy. Do you understand what I say? Do I speak English?
Yeah. I mean, you want people to have, skin in the game. You want these lesser teams to be spending money, and then the whole league will benefit as a result.
Yep.
It's a very collectivist mentality, but the Yankees, the Dodgers, they got their own revenue streams. They don't want to give that up. But it is interesting how anytime you bring this up, and we see the comments on our YouTube channel, it's over the top, where Dodger fans are quick to respond. They're saying, hey, you got parity of spending in the NFL, and it's the darn Kansas City Chiefs every year, and here we don't have parity, but then we have teams that rise up and win, like the Kansas City Royals about 10 years ago. And, sure, the Dodgers won last year and in the COVID season, but it's not like they've won 8 in a row. It's not like the Dodgers have been the Kansas City Chiefs.
No, but they've been a first place team virtually for a decade. So therefore they're far superior to a ton of other people.
Mm-hmm.
So you can mandate, regulations as it relates to salary cap, luxury tax, my Florida spending. You can't mandate intelligence. It doesn't mean that just because they spend it, it's going to be spent correctly or there's not going to be breakdowns or mistakes made. That's the human element of major league player acquisition. Hey, if I were king, that's what I would do, but we'll see. I'm not king yet, but I'll let you know.
You are the franchise.
I'll be on Time Magazine wearing a crown. Okay, listen, we hope you have enjoyed this podcast. We are here Mondays at 1:30, Thursdays at 1:30. Want you to share. You got a Rolodex. I want you to tell everybody who we are. Hacksaw is back. Tell them about these podcasts. You can really help us grow. And this thing has kind of really exploded.